We're trying to figure out why we needed the word aleha to derive that the various Isuri Arias would not be docha the mitzvah of Yibum. Isn't it obvious? They're all Isuri Kari, so of course they shouldn't be docha Yibum. Just the one case that the Torah announces, namely of Ashisach, so that's overridden because that is the case of Yibum. But otherwise, why did I need the pasuk of Aleha? So we had brought a possibility from a brisa regarding how we would have thought that Nisa's Bezdin, putting someone to death on Shabbos, which involves an Issa Havara, even an Issa Bishul as well, that this would override Shabbos, and we needed a special pasuk to teach me that it doesn't. So we see that there is such a possibility that if you have a mitzvah essay, maybe it would be dochef in Issa Kari. So we said no. That case is different because I would have derived it from some sort of a Kal V'chomer, because of the fact that it's because it's Ritzicha, the mitzvah of putting someone who deserves capital punishment to death even overrides Avoda. So since Avoda overrides Shabbos, I would have thought this would override Shabbos as well. So that's why I need the pasuk of Lo Savar Leish B'Kol Moshe Sechem B'Yom Shabbos. So in the middle of that discussion, I think you're left off on the seventh line of Daf Zayin and Aleph. So Hadar Amar, Puris Meis Mitzvah Titcha Shabbos Mikal V'Chomer. We had said that maybe it's not the case because of the fact that we see that Puris Meis Mitzvah, despite the fact that it's Docha Avoda, person is going to do Avoda in the base of Mikdash, and he sees that there's a Meis Mitzvah that needs to be buried. He has to bury the Meis Mitzvah, not do the Avoda. And nonetheless, Puris Meis Mitzvah is not Docha Shabbos, so maybe it's not such a good Kal V'Chomer. So Hadar Amar. And we learned that from the word V'la'achoso, that the Kuris Meis Mitzvah is Doches Avoda. So Hadar Amar Kuris Meis Mitzvah Titcha Shabbos Kal V'chomer. So I said it's not really such a perfect reputation of the Kal V'chomer because maybe the Kal V'chomer should include Kuris Meis Mitzvah. That we should see from here that Kuris Meis Mitzvah should also be Doches Shabbos, just like it's Doches Avoda. Ma Avoda, she Doches Shabbos, Kuris Meis Mitzvah Doches Osa. Avoda is Doches Shabbos. So you have to do the Avoda in the base of Mikdash even on Shabbos, Moado. And Kuris Meis Mitzvah is Doche Avoda, so Mila'achoso, from that pasuk, Mila'achoso. Shabbos Shenitcha B'nei Avoda, Eno Din Shetei Kuris Meis Mitzvah Doche Osa. So therefore, maybe Shabbos itself, which is overridden by Avoda, so Kuris Meis Mitzvah should be Doche Shabbos, the Tam Aloma. That's why I need the pasuk Lo Sevaru. So in other words, it could be that the pasuk Lo Sevaru is just teaching me that I can't learn from the Kal V'chomer that the mitzvah of Ritzicha would be Doche Shabbos that I otherwise would have been able to learn from a Kal V'chomer, but it's not necessarily the case that I would normally assume that a mitzvah saseh would be Doche, a mitzvah lo saseh sheyesh b'kares, and that's why I needed lo sivaru. So I don't necessarily need the word aleh either to teach me that the mitzvah saseh of Yibum would not be Doche the various Isuri Arayis. It's obvious they wouldn't be Doche the various Isuri Arayis. I don't even have a Kal V'chomer in that case to worry about. Lamai, the Salik Adaitim Meikara, but according to the original interpretation that we had of the Brisa, the Mechilta that we bought of Talmud Echad, Mishuma Rishval Amar Talmud Echad, that was the whole Brisa that we had, that wanted to derive perhaps that Misa's Bezdin should override Shabbos, and we thought maybe that's because an essay would normally be Docha, even a Losas Sheyesh Bokares. We found that it wasn't necessarily what it was talking about, but even if it would have been what it was talking about, you might decide the my oeno decomer. So what's the oeno when we were said that, oh, maybe that's not the case. So let's try to understand how we would have interpreted the Brisa if that's what the Brisa would have been saying. To call my oeno decomer, so haki kamer. This is what the oeno was saying. This is the other side of the equation. Mani mekayem, it could be. Mani mekayem mechalem mos yimasa, that when is it that we would say that a person would be put to death for being mechal Shabbos? B'sham malachos chutzvi mitzvahs bezdin. This is how the Brisa would have gone. Maybe only when it kind of comes to other malachos, so we're not going to allow them on Shabbos. But putting someone to death, we would allow on Shabbos, just like it's doche avodah. Misas bezdin dochi Shabbos, the asiyasi v'dochi lo sese, because we would say as a general rule that a mitzvah sese would be doche lo sese, even on lo sese sheyesh b'karis. So hada amar. And then afterwards, we would have interpreted the Brisa as saying, the other side of the equation, maybe when is it that an essay is doche lo saseh? That's if it's a regular lo saseh, she'ein bokaris. she losa sekreda. Losa says she yesh bokaris mishamish le dedachi. But how do where would we infer that an essay would be doka? Losa says she yesh bokaris. Hada amar. And then the other, so the reason why we would have needed the Xeris Akasiv anyways, because we would have said, no, if an essay can be doka a regular losa set, then it should be able to be doka losa set shesh bakaris too. Hadamar atu essay di doches losa set lab losa set chomer mine kasi essay vidachile. The losa set is much more chomer than an essay. That it requires a lot more tshuva, right? You got to wait till Yom Kippur to get forgiven. So it's a much more chomer avera when you violate a losas, and yet nonetheless we see that an essay can override it. So mali chomer zuta, mali chomer rabba. Once it's more severe than an essay, and yet nonetheless an essay can override it. So once an essay can override a regular losas, it should be able to override an essay sheyesh b'karis tamaloma. That's why I would have needed the pasuk of Lo Sivaru, but we couldn't bring up a proof that that's what it was really talking about, because it could be that the whole brisa was derived was working based on a Kal B'chomer, saying that not that the Nestle would be dochas Losa says sheish b'karis, but I would have thought that based on a Kal B'chomer, Misas Bezin would be dochas Shabbos. Ela itzrich saka daitech amina. So that we still don't really have a good proof as to why I needed aleha in the case of Yibum. Why did I need the pasuk, the word aleha, with respect to Achos Isha, to teach me that when it comes to other Isuri Arayas other than Eshesak, such as Achos Isha, that it would not that Yibum would not override the Isur Arayas. Why do I need it? I would have thought that Tahabi Hai Eshesak Davashaya B'Klav and Klal Lamed, Lo Lamed al Atzma Yatsa, El Lamed al Klal Kulo Yatsa. I would have thought that I finally am putting, those things that I say very quickly in the morning and Rabbi Shmuel Omer to use, that finally one of these principles I could figure out why in the world I'm mumbling it every morning. So because I would have said maybe this is an example of one of these cases that I had something that was part of a general rule and went outside of the general rule to teach me not only about itself but about every case. So Eshesach was one of the arayos. And yet the Torah says the Yibum overrides Eshesach. That is the mitzvah of Yibum. In the case of Eshesach, she just says Yibum overrides the Isur Arayis of Eshesach. I would have thought that it would override all of these Isur Arayis as well. That's why I needed the pasuk of Aleh. In the case of Achos Isha, to teach me, no. Even in the case of Yibum, you're not allowed to marry an Achos Isha. The Tanya, because we have a brisa that says Davar Shayah B'Klav Yosem B'Klav B'Chulei. Okay, so what would be an example of this principle? If something was Yatzam in a cloud, so it teaches about not only the one case, but it teaches about Haklal Kulo Yatzam. So that would be from the case of, for example, where we know that a Tameh who eats a kachim is chayav kares. So we have a general proposition. The general proposition, that case is not recited in the Gemara over here, so I'll just bring it for you. It's a Gemara. It's a pasuk in Parshas Emor. Emor alehem l'doro sechem. It happens to begin with the word Emor, even though it's not the beginning of the parsha. Emor alehem l'doro sechem kol isha sheikva mikol zarachem l'kadashim asher kishu b'nei Yisrael Hashem v'tumaso alav. The person eats kachim and they are a tamei goof, but not nefrasa nefashim lepanayini Hashem. So then the person gets karis. That's the general proposition. And then I have another. So the shlamim would be included. Korban shlamim would be included in that. And yet I have a separate pasuk with respect to shlamim that says that the person ate a korban shlamim bitumas olav and they had tumas aguf. That person gets karis. It's a separate pasuk. The shlamim were included in all the kachim of the first pasuk that we cited in Parshas Emor. Why do I have a special separate pasuk with respect to shlamim? To teach me that this teaches me about all of the kachim. That just as shlamim are a case of a korban that I offer on the mizbeach, as opposed to something that I consecrate that I'm not able to offer on the mizbeach because it's not an animal. It's bedek habayis. It's I consecrate my house. I consecrate I consecrate an expensive watch and I give it to the Beis Hamikdash. That's kachei bedek habayis. I've called kachei mizbeach, so it's only a case of kachei mizbeach. Yatsu kachei bedek habayis as opposed to kachei bedek habayis. So let's say I consecrate a delicious babka. So I eat the babka, b'tumas haguf. So that wouldn't be a chiyuv garis. So hachinami, so here as well, I could say the same thing. I would have thought, Eishesach was included in all of the arayas that we say are also that a person would get, kares for violating all of the arayas, right? The lama yatzisa lahaki shalep. So why does the Torah have the specific case of Eishesach to teach me that there's a mitzvah yibum in the case of Eishesach? So lama lacha ma Eishesach sharia. Just like Eishesach is mutter in the case of yibum. Because it says Yavama Yavo Aleha, Afkol Arayos Nami Sharian. So all the Arayos as well should become mutter as well. Why don't I? So that's why I needed the pasuk of Aleh. So he said, nah, that's not a reason to have required this for this pasuk to teach me that the Arayos are not doche the mitzvah of that the mitzvah of Yibum is not doche the Arayos. Midami Hasam. Klabi Isu, Prat Isser. In the case of the Shlomim, I have one general pasuk in Parshas Emor that teaches me that if I eat any kachim betuma saguf, so it's an issa kares. And then I have a separate pasuk about shlamim that teaches me that if somebody eats a shlamim betuma saguf, it's an issa kares. Both of them are an issa. So one issa is clarifying the nature of the other issa. Here, the general klal is that all the arayos are included in the issa kares. Uprat beheter, and then there's one case, the Eishes Achla. We're told that in the case of Yibum, then there is no punishment or kares. In fact, it's even a mitzvah to marry an Eishes Achla in the case of Yibum. So that's an exception that goes in a completely opposite direction. It goes in the direction of heter. So therefore, that's not similar to this cloud. That's similar to something else that we say in the morning at the end of Kabbanis and Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Halodami Ela, to the other principle of the Dava Shahaya B'chlav. We have something that was part of a general rule. And then it's teaching me something totally different. In other words, it is an abrogation of the normal rule. The normal rule is that it would be usher, and in this case, it's mutter. So then we have the principle that in this case, we treat differently from all the other cases, except insofar as the Torah says, no, treat it in other respects like all the other cases. But we're certainly not going to derive that all the other cases should be like this case. The Tanya, where do we have an application of this principle? We have it with respect to the Korban Asham that's brought by a Mitzorah. Because the Korban Asham brought by a Mitzorah, we say that instead of sprinkling all of the dam on the Mizbeach, the dam is a little bit of the dam is also sprinkled on the Behonos, on the big right toe, and on the right thumb, and on the right earlobe, before you put the rest of the dam on the mizbeach. So therefore, that's an abrogation of the normal principle that I would put all of the dam on the mizbeach. So once it departs, so with respect to this abrogation of the normal rule, so I have to say that in other respects, it is treated like other hashamas. It's treated like other kabbanos in other respects the same way. The Tanya Dava Shayam Klavi Yasli Dama Dava Echadash Yata Rashad Aksiv Lala Chek Sweater Kulakha Kasim Beperish Ketzad. Where do we find this? We find this with respect to the Korban Asham Mitzorah, because the Torah says explicitly Ve'shachat es hakeves b'mkom asher yishchat es hakatas ve'es hola b'mkom hakodesh, that I would check this keves in the same place where I checked, namely in the tzapon ha'azara, the north side of the azara, the same place I would check the katas and the ola, makom hakodesh ki kachatas ha'ashim hu. And then I have an extraneous part of the pasuk that says, because you should know that this asham is treated like a regular chatas, in the way that the procedural rules of this asham is treated like a regular chatas, keep chatas, asham hu lakohen. Shein tamalomer. Why do I need this extra word, chatas asham, that it has, that this asham is treated like a chatas in terms of its regular avodas? I'm going to burn the chalavim, the fats on the mizbech, and so forth. The matam lo chatas asham, the fishiyatz asham mitzvah lidam medare hechadash. Because Asham Mitzorah was departed from other types of regular kabbanas, so even a regular Asham, to have a different rule, a rule of which abrogates what the normal rules would be. But Boan Yad, Boan regular Yamanis. So you take some of the blood, instead of sprinkling it all on the Mizbeach, you sprinkle some of it on the right thumb and the right big toe, and also on the right earlobe, Beozin, the Hagos Siyud Man's Beozin, and the right earlobe. So Yaakov lo yehei cartilage. Yaakov lo yehei toad matan dama mum be'mum megabe misbech. So I might think that I wouldn't have to sprinkle the rest of the blood on the misbech, and I wouldn't burn the fats on the misbech. We turn the page. Zion Amud Beis. Talmud Lomar, so that's why I need the special pasuk of ki kachatas hashamu to teach me that in other respects it's treated like a regular asham, which is like a chatas, that I would sprinkle the rest of the dam on the mizbeach in the normal fashion, and I would burn the fats on the mizbeach. Machatas tuuna matan damim veimurim legabe mizbeach af asham ton matan damim veimurim legabe mizbeach. Lo ahadre kra, and if the pasuk cannot come back to say kakatas kashamhu, then havamina I would have thought that only with respect to that which it was that which that since it departed that it's from the normal course, and it said that you're going to do matam behonos, and then it says explicitly that one thing that you do the same is that you shecht it on the north side, the way that you would shecht the way you would shecht the chatas, the way you would shecht an ola. So that's it. Those are the only rules where that would apply to the asham of a mitzvah. And that which is not recorded explicitly, namely that you would have the regular sprinkling of the dam on the mizbeach and the burning of the fats on the mizbeach, I would have thought I don't do it because this is different from a regular korban asham. So here too, havamina eishes ach lishtarya ishtarai. So here I would have said that in eishes ach, I would automatically say that since the only case that the Torah says that I would suspend the Yisra Arayos, it's in the case of eishes ach, I would say, okay, so that is departed from all of the other rules, that Yibum would override the Yisra Arayos of eishes ach, but Shar Arayos lo. But I would have automatically known that this wouldn't apply to other Arayos. So I don't need the pasuk of Aleh to teach me that the mitzvah essay of Yibum is not going to override the other arayos. I would already figure out that eishes ach is an exception to the rule, because it's not that this is explaining to me how an issur applies. It's saying, no, there's a special heter in this case. So the general rules of how we derive the Torah is that a special heter would only apply to the case where it's reported, and it wouldn't apply to the other cases. So I wouldn't have thought that Yibum would override the other arayos. Rather, what? No. Maybe the reason why I need the pasuk of Aleh is for a different reason, because maybe I would say Taisi Achosisha b'mamatzino be'eit meishasach. I would have thought the case of Achosisha, where the woman to do that the one that falls in front of the brother for Yibum happens to be his wife's sister. I would have thought that in that case you would do Yibum. That's why I need the pasuk of Aleh, because I would have thought that I would derive it from a mamatzino from meishasach. Ma meishasach mi'aibma. Just like a case of eishes ach, you do yibum. So we have a principle in Torah called mamatzinu, that I look at similar type cases and I say, let me derive the laws of this case from another case. So in that case, I have a law that says in eishes ach, before I perform yibum with respect to an eishes ach. So I would have thought, that's a case of arayos. Achosisha is also a case of arayos, so I would perform yibum in this case too. Achosisha tisyaibim. So we say, why in the world would I? What's the mamatzinu? They're not the same at all. In one case, there's one Isser Arayos, namely eishes ach. In the case of Achosisha, there are two Isser Arayos. Number one, she's eishes ach, and number two, she's Achosisha. Midami Hasam Charisur. In the case of eishes ach, there's only one Isser Arayos. That this happens to be your brother's wife. Haka, but if the brother's wife also happens to be your wife's sister, so then there's going to be two Arayos. So they're not the same. One is worse than the other. Haka Tracery. So we say, no, Ma'adatema, I would have thought that I would apply the principle of Hoyav Ishtari, that once it becomes mutter for one thing, it would become mutter for another thing. Like, for example, I saw in Al Adab that there was someone who wanted to apply this to the Chidah, wanted to apply this principle in the 9 days, that if somebody ate meat on Shabbos during the 9 days, it was mutter on Shabbos, they could have it from a Lava Malcolm Motzi Shabbos. Hoyav Ishtari. Right, yeah. Others disagreed with him. That's the idea. It already was mutter, so okay, so let it stay mutter. Uminat Timra. Where do we find that this principle of Hoyav Ishtari, I mean in Hoyav Ishtari, where do we find it? We find it in the following brisa, the Tanya. I haven't drunk any coffee. Amen. Okay. The Tanya, the brisa says, if I have a mitzvah, Shachal Shmini Shelo be'erev Pesach, we want the mitzvah to be able to bring his korban Pesach, because it's an Issachar, he's not to bring in korban Pesach. But he says, so his 8th day, when he's supposed to bring his korban to purify himself from having been a mitzvah, so his 8th day falls out on Erev Pesach. Raw carry bobayom. And not only that, but to add insult to injury, he also happened to have a seminal emission that day, which also requires tara. The tavo, and he had tefillah from his seminal emission, so he's now at full yom. So number one, he's a Mechusa Kippurim, that he's on his 8th day of being a Mitzorah, right? And number two, he is also, and he has to bring his korban asham of Mitzorah. And number two, he also is a Tabu Yom, because he needs to wait till nighttime to become completely purified from his tumas keri. So Amor Chachamim, the Chachamim said, even though as a general rule, we don't allow a Tabu Yom to enter into the Har HaBayis, nonetheless, this Tvul Yom we're going to allow to enter. This one can enter into the Har HaBayis, because we want him to bring his korban Pesach. And the Mitzorah is allowed to enter into the Har HaBayis. He has to bring his korban that day. That's not a problem. But it's even the fact that it was added on that he's a Tvul Yom, so better that the essay sheyesh bo kares of bringing a korban Pesach, which is a mitzvah essay that if one doesn't do, they get kares. Let that be tochem. The fact that we don't allow a Tvul Yom to enter into the Habayis, v'yitka essay sheyesh bo kares, sheyesh bo kares. Rabbi Yochanan said that the reality is that the Var Torah is not even an essay. Now it's a chumrah b'alma that we normally don't allow a Tvul Yom. A Baal Keri is not allowed to enter into the Har HaBayis because he's too much shiyatza migufo. That's why people nowadays don't want to enter into the Har HaBayis, so they're worried they might be a Baal Keri, so they go to the mikveh first. If they're going to go into the Har HaBayis, because the Har HaBayis is Machana Leviyah, and a Baal Keri is not allowed to go into the Machana Leviyah. But if he said Tvul Yom, really he could go into the Machana Leviyah. It's only an Issa D'Rabbanan that he can't go into the Machana Leviyah. It's not even an Issa D'Oraisa Shein Bo Kares. Because Rabbi Yochanan said that Torah, if you do essay leispe, it's not even, there's nothing. Shenamar, when it's there was a pasuk v'shalchumi namachaneh. You got to make sure that anybody who's a Baal Keri is sent outside of the Machana Levi. Yeah, that's if they're not a Tvul Yom. But if they are a Tvul Yom, so only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Who established this Issa D'Rabbanan? It was the Melech Yehoshaphat. Melech Yehoshaphat got up and he made it and he declared an Issa D'Rabbanan. Shenamar, that this is what he darshins, what Rabbi Yochanan darshins from a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. V'yamod, this is as they were preparing to go to war against Ammon and Moab. V'yamod Yehoshaphat b'kal Yehuda v'Yushalayim v'Beis Hashem lifnei hachatzer hachadasha. He stood in front of the new courtyard. What made the new courtyard new? It was new that he declared a new Isser in the courtyard. He said, "My chatzer hachadasha." So Amar Rabbi Amar, we have Rabbi Yochanan. It's another gear. So Amar Rebbe. The Rebbe said, and maybe Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us the law of Rebbe. Shechidshu b'advarim, that he innovated. New things. He innovated in Isser. He said, he said a Tvul Yom is not allowed to enter into the Machana Leviyah. It's not even an Isser. It's not even an essay. It's an Isser D'Rabbanan b'alma. So for sure, the essay sheyesh bo kares is going to override that. Fine. But Ula said something else. Ula held that what happens when you have the Mitzorah, whose 8th day has fallen out in Erev Pesach, and he has to bring his korban asham. So he has to have the blood placed upon his right big thumb and his right thumb, not big thumb, his right thumb, his right big toe, and his right earlobe, and he has to move. He has to stick his hands and his feet into the Azara. So that would happen. So he stands in the Shar Nicanor, which was this little chamber in between, say, the Ezras Nashim and the Ezras Yisrael. So that's entering into the Azara. The Azara is already the Kedusha Machan and Shekhinah. So that already you're not supposed to enter. If you're a Mechusa Kippurim, if you're a Tvul Yom, you're not allowed to enter into that area. But he enters halfway into that area. So say it's halfway, so that doesn't count for anything. So say, yes, but that's an Issa Kares. So halfway wouldn't count for anything. If you hold that halfway doesn't count for anything. But Ula holds that Bia Mamixa Shema Bia. Ula holds that a halfway entrance counts as a full-fledged entrance. And that there would be an Issa Kares. Yet nonetheless, the Torah says that we will allow a Mitzorah to do this because the Torah says a Mitzorah is allowed to enter when he brings his korban. So obviously, a Mitzorah is allowed to bring his hands and his feet inside, so stick inside of the Azara, despite the fact that Bia B'Mitzvah says Shema Bia. And Ula, so why then are we allowing the same thing with respect to a Tvul Yom? We don't have a Gzeras HaKasuv that a person who had a Riyas Keri, who is a Tvul Yom, would be allowed to enter Bias Mixas into the Azara. This should be an Issa Kares that the Tvul Yom is entering into the Machane Shekhinah. This is an Issa Kares, as Rashi says. Certainly Tvul Yom would be an Issa Kares. So why do we allow, even though this Mitzorah is also a Tvul Yom? So this is where whole history comes in. Up until now, it hasn't been relevant to our kasha. This is the kasha. That since he was mutter for his tzaras to enter a little bit into the azara, so too for his riyas keri is allowed to enter a little bit into the azara. Yeah, so the Satosa says, once we're allowing bias mixas according to Ula, why don't we just allow bias kulo? So he says no, because bias mixas is not learned from an explicit pasuk. Bias kulo is learned from El Mikdash Tosava. Bias mixas is only learned from a hekesh according to Ula, so therefore it's a lesser avera. So we don't allow a bigger avera, we only allow the lesser avera. It gives another teretz as well. So therefore we say, oh, the ishtri, midami ludula. So we say, nah, our case with respect to the Eishes Ach, the Achos Isha is not similar to Ula. In Ula's case, the Tumas Tzaras came first, and then afterwards the person had Tumas Keri. So Tena Checha Denasa Mace. So that would make sense in the event that the person, the brother who died, originally married this woman. So this woman was already an Eishes Ach. And then afterwards, the person who is the live brother had married the sister of his wife. So then she became also a surah as an achos isha. So then we say, since she was already standing as being muteris based on being eishes ach, so she also became muteris when the achos isha prohibition was tacked on. Similar to the case of the mitzvah who then afterwards became a tkuyam, would have been mutter to enter a little bit into the azara based on being a mitzvah. So we also allow it based on his now becoming a tkuyam as well. But let's say that at the time in which the dead brother got married, the live brother had already been married to the sister of his wife. So then she already started out as an achos isha. So isar achos isha kadim. So the isar achos isha, she was already prohibited to the first fellow as an achos isha before she was married to the brother who then died. So then that wouldn't be analogous in that case. And even in the case where it would be in the same direction as our mitzvah tkuyom case, that would only work in a certain situation. That's only in the case where the dead brother died first, and then afterwards the other brother married the sister, so she became an achos isha. The chazila de beni, so that she would have been as an eishes ach. He would have been able to perform yibum before the time that he married the sister, between the time when his brother died and when he married the sister. Below mace, but if the mace died and he didn't die yet, the mace first got married to the sister. He first got married and then he died, and then he did not die. And before he died, the brother decided to marry the sister of his wife, so she became an achos isha already before the time that he died. So then the wife was never permitted as only an eishes ach. So Mila Modi Ula, and Ula would agree in our case as well, that if the Mechusar Kippurim of the Mitzorah became a Tabul Yom, or he was Roa carried before the time that he was already eligible to bring his korban, Shimar carried B'leil Shmini, when it was only the night of the Shmini, and before he was eligible to become Torah altogether, Sheimaknis Yadol Bahonos, Shelo Yatsa B'Shashi Uyalah the Habi Korban, that he would not have been matir in that case, because there was never a moment in time before the Riyas Keri that he would have been able to bring the korban as a Mitzorah alone. So you'll have to say that the word aleh to teach me that the mitzvah of yibum does not override the isra arayis of achos isha would only be relevant. I would only have said hov ishtri in this weird, unusual, sort of case. Heichab denasa meis umeis ve'achakak nasakai, where the brother who died had originally married the eishes ach, and only after he died. And she was only an eishes ach, and she would have been permitted in that capacity to the live brother. Only afterwards did the brother then marry the sister. So that only afterwards, after he had been eligible to marry her based on eishes ach alone, did she become an eishes ach and an ochas isha. So I would have said only then. Or ishtri. So I would then need the pasuk aleh only to cover that case. It would be in a very limited situation where I would need the gzeras hakasuv. Okay, we'll stop there.